He might actually be the most derivative one of all. I mean, Christ, the same house.
Maybe so. But you forgot the first rule of surviving a stab movie. Never answer the...
I'm bored.
Wait!
And welcome back to Horror Queers. We're talking, what time did you get in? And when do you fly out? We're talking, we don't need to be friends. We're family. And we're talking, put on some dry clothes and come play with us. And I'm Joe.
And I'm Trace, and we're talking practically licked it clean.
Oh boy, did she ever.
There is a lot of uncomfortable sexuality in this movie, Joe.
I don't know. Do we call it uncomfortable? Maybe it's just because it's Matthew Good delivering so many of these innuendos, and he is looking so fucking good in this movie.
Yeah, I was talking about the incest part of it, but yeah, sure.
Oh, sure, fine. You know what? If you don't want to get freaky with me, Trace, you can just say so.
Oh my god, I'm getting real woke on you now, Joe. I can't do incest.
Fair enough. It is still the last universal taboo.
It really is. Everyone, we are discussing Park Chan-wook's 2013 film Stoker, which is, well, celebrated its 10th anniversary earlier this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this isn't necessarily a programmatic pick from an anniversary point of view. This is a, hey, we've wanted to cover this for a long time. We're probably going to cover Director Park's filmography in total over time. And also, I really just wanted to revisit this movie.
You know, correct me if I'm wrong. I actually think we did have this on the schedule earlier this year, but we bumped it for something. And but because, yeah, we were both like, no, like we still want to like cover it this year, we squeezed it in.
We did. I can't remember why we bumped it for whatever reason, but yeah, I mean, I think we even floated the possibility of covering this in our Underseen or Underrated programming last January.
Yeah, that may entirely be possible. But yeah, no, Stoker. I mean, this was a second watch. This is a rewatch for me. What about for you?
I've seen this probably 3 times before this. It's not my favorite of his, which, you know, is like a very, very high bar to clear. Say. But I do love all of his movies. And I particularly like this one because this is the English language one, right? Like, this is the one where he is pushing himself to try to make a North American movie as opposed to a Korean film, but also keep all of his sensibilities. And, of course, then there's the weird queer connection with the writer.
Yes, Mr. Wentworth Miller. This man's career, I'm telling you, like, I mean, everyone, queer writer. He's only written one other film, and the other one, I'm interested to know if you have seen this. It's the 2016 Kate Beckinsale starring film, The Disappointments Room.
Oh, I know of it, but I haven't seen it.
It's very boring. Like, it's I feel like it was one of those movies, you know, wasn't screened for critics, got really shitty reviews. It's not like the worst thing in the world. It's just really mediocre. And I think it does show what a really good director and what a really bad director can do with a decent script.
Yeah, that is interesting because, I mean, I don't know about you. I have this movie on physical, so I was able to watch some of the special features. There's a couple of mediocre, non-important deleted scenes. And then there is like a nearly 30-minute making of featurette where we've got Director Park, we've got all of the actors, we've got the costume department, the production designer, a bunch of different folks nary a single shot of Wentworth Miller in this entire doc. And part of me is just like, okay, this was his attempt to break out as a screenwriter after, folks, if the name sounds familiar and you didn't clock it, this is the star of Prison Break.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we got Prison Break. You may also know him from The Flash or DC's Legends of Tomorrow, or maybe his film appearances in films like Resident Evil Afterlife, or, you're going to love this, Joe, the voice of the AI plane in Stealth.
Oh my God. Okay.
I saw that in theaters way back when.
I mean, Jessica Biel come through. Yay.
Jessica Biel come through. Yes. And he's actually really good as the voice of this AI robotic plane. Also, honestly, given today's conversations about AI, I do wonder if Stealth would maybe, I'm not going to say we need to
now.
I'm not going to say we need to reappraise it, but I looked at the reviews at the time and it was very much like, oh, it's really stupid. And I'm sure it is. But But sure. I wonder if it would be less stupid today.
It's stupid and timely now. But yeah, I mean, I really enjoy Wentworth Miller as a performer. I've watched nearly all of the things that you listed on that filmography.
Right.
And I was really perplexed when I heard that this was from him as a screenwriter, particularly because the content, as you said, it's very sexual, it's very incestuous, it's dark, it's, evoking a lot of Hitchcock films and that kind of stuff. So I was really appreciative, particularly when we later find out that Miller is a gay man. He kind of fell out of the public eye, and I feel like that's when he ended up coming out. And
yeah,
it's just interesting to see this kind of career evolution from him. And I wish that he would continue to write stuff, because I think this movie is really interesting. But you're right, it is also elevated by Park Chan-wook.
Yeah, so he actually came out the year this movie came out. It was like 6 months later. But I do know he has dealt with a lot of mental health issues. He was on The Flash, he playing Captain Cold, he moved over to Legend of Tomorrow, and was only in the first season because he had to step down because it was just too busy.
Oh, okay.
But he also, he's had a struggle with depression since childhood. And I just saw, this is news to me, in 2021, he revealed he had been diagnosed with autism.
Oh, wow. Okay. So yeah, he has definitely been on a journey of self-discovery.
Very much so. And I don't know if that has anything to do with why he wasn't in the production features, or maybe it was because he was a writer on this, but he was also acting while this was being made. So I don't know if he was ever on set when they were filming this movie.
Could be, yeah, because the documentary was definitely made in the house during the 40 days that they were shooting in Tennessee.
Yeah, exactly. Well, okay, so let's move into kind of how this got created. I will say, we've gone through the Wentworth Miller of it all, but I didn't know he also wrote a prequel to this movie at the same time called Uncle Charlie, which be honest with me, do you want, would you want to see a prequel to this, given that the film that we have seen already kind of gives you the whole backstory?
Yeah, that to me seems more like a writing exercise where you try to come up with something interesting. I believe he said he had it from a dream. That's where the idea of, a brother coming to pick up another brother from the mental institution, and why is he doing that, and what happens, and so on. And I thought, okay, that's an interesting genesis. And yeah, sure, write me a prequel story. But you're right, it's covered in this movie, so I don't know how much more there would be to discover. You know what, though? Didn't we say the same thing about Orphan First Kill before we saw it? I mean, prove us wrong, Hollywood. Prove us wrong. Well, this didn't make any money, so we're not going to get that prequel. But absolutely not, no. I will say, so the screenplay for Stoker, though, did wind up on the 2010 blacklist. And I know we've talked about this before. I don't know if we've ever actually gone into it. But if you don't know what that is, the blacklist is an annual survey of the most liked motion picture screenplays not yet produced. And an important distinction here is that these are not necessarily the best, they are just the most liked based on a survey of studio and production company executives. So I was actually really curious because I feel like I always hear this all the time, but I've never actually looked at one of the blacklists. So other screenplays on the 2010 blacklist with Stoker were Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. Okay. Chronicle. Ooh, a fucking future episode. Stay tuned for that, folks. Edge of Tomorrow. Yes. Gangster Squad. Meh. The Impossible. Really good. The Hunger Games. The Last Witch Hunter. The Nicolas Cage movie. Oh, boy. That one is not good. Looper. Oh, I love Looper. Love Looper. Here's one for you, Joe. Oz the Great and Powerful. Oh, you mean the worst movie ever? I fucking hate that movie. Well, it was really, what's interesting though is some of the movies on the list there were others that I didn't mention, obviously, but some of them came out in 2017 and they were on the 2010 blacklist. Wow. Ugh. This is one of those things where you hear the phrase development hell. Can you imagine having a screenplay that you have toiled and worked on, and it makes something as coveted as the blacklist, and you think, great, somebody's going to fucking option this. My life is going to change. I'm going to be the person who gets a movie made out of my script. and then you have to wait 7 years?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Mm-hmm. Well, because, yeah, it makes the list, but that doesn't mean that a producer's going to be like, yeah, sure, I'll finance that thing.
Sure. And here's the thing. I'm willing to bet that there's a bunch of folks who are like, yeah, it made the list, and then nothing ever happened.
Exactly. Well, and also, it doesn't guarantee a quality film. I mean, again, like we just talked about Oz the Great and Powerful. But you'll love to know this. Bad Teacher was on the 2008 blacklist.
Ooh, that is a Trace favorite, folks. We actually watched this independently when we were just hanging out earlier this year. It's not a great movie, but I am going to say it's a fun movie.
It's a 5-star Trace movie.
Oh my God. You know what? We keep joking about how we're coming closer together in taste over the course of the podcast. When you say things like that, it makes me think there's still room for us to get closer.
Oh yeah, 100%. But yeah, so I agree with you, but it also shows like, because that distinction between the best and most liked. And I was like, well, yeah, but how can you say what the best is? Like, if they think, if they like it, wouldn't that be then these are the best for them?
No, see, I think when you look at the list, oftentimes it's either a mix of creatively innovative films, which I would argue Stoker definitely falls under,
right,
and then films that they probably think are inherently commercial, which is how we get something like Oz the Great and Powerful.
That's fair. Well, also though, for having film executives and producers look at this, they have to be thinking about money and budget when they're making this list as well.
100%. Yeah.
Whereas if you had critics doing this, reading screenplays and making these kind of lists, I wonder how different those would be.
Yeah, it would be which are going to produce the best movies. Although even that, I think we could argue there's something to be said for a well-written screenplay. But then again, you look at something like Stoker where the visuals elevate this movie to a whole new realm. Like, I can imagine that this script is probably solid. There's a couple of narrative quibbles I'm going to raise over the course of this episode. But watching this movie, I was just like, oh, look at the camera work. Oh, look at the production design. Like, there's a bunch of things that were probably mentioned haphazardly in the screenplay that then just pop off the screen.
Oh, yeah. And when we get to this, I mean, right from the get-go, this movie oozes style.
You said it before we started recording. You were like, this may be a case of style over substance for me.
Well, it's not even that. I don't mean that in a bad way. Like, I mean, it's still a 3.5 out of 5. I don't think this is a great film. I do think the weakest aspect is the script, but that's not to say it's a bad script. I just, I felt very, I felt the ending was very anticlimactic on a first watch and a rewatch, and it's weird. I actually remembered this being a lot longer, and the 99-minute runtime surprised me in a way where I was like, oh, I actually maybe would have taken more scenes to kind of flesh some of these characters out, specifically Nicole Kidman's character.
Yeah, it was funny reading some reviews of this where people actively praise Kidman, and to me, she is a supporting actress in this movie. You know, she's there, but she doesn't get a ton to do. And then, you know, we can talk about somebody like Jackie Weaver who shows up, kills everything, and then is literally killed off.
Well, and I will tell you, so I actually rewatched the trailer for this right before we started recording. The trailer opens with Nicole Kidman's climactic monologue to India, where she's like, I want to see you suffer. Right. And it also spoils Jackie Weaver's death.
I mean, not surprised.
I know.
You take me to task for complaining about marketing and trailers and stuff, but folks, stop showing shit from the third act of your movie.
I think for me though, like honestly, because you would think, okay, how do you market a movie like Stoker? Okay, maybe we'll lead with the whole the premise of the movie.
Sure. Start at the fucking funeral.
Yeah, exactly. The trailer doesn't really give plot away. It's just the vibes of like, oh, there's a mysterious newcomer in the house. I don't even know if they say it's an uncle.
Oh my God. So the marketing also said, oh, it's style over substance. We'll just do a vibes trailer.
Exactly. Yay, fuck Searchlight. Anyway. Okay. Well, the name Stoker might signal to people that the film is about vampires, or even Bram Stoker himself. It's not. Shockingly enough.
Although, if you try to do any research on this movie, guess what comes up?
Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Fucking all the time. Although I did see a couple of people try to argue that these folks are emotional vampires, and I think I could be persuaded to get behind that.
Okay, but did they just happen to watch an episode of What We Do in the Shadows and then decide to make that statement?
No, because I think most of the think pieces came out when this movie came out in 2013.
Okay, so then they stole that from this. Okay. Okay, but nevertheless, apparently Miller had to explain this several times because, the name Stoker comes from, shockingly, the word stoker, a person who tends to the furnace on a steamship or a steam locomotive or a machine for feeding a fire. That makes more thematic sense with this movie.
Yeah, I mean, I think you probably could have tried to go in a different direction. Like, the name definitely makes sense when you have seen the movie, but it is a bit of a marketing hurdle.
100%. Well, maybe if they'd explained the plot and the marketing a little bit more, but,
I mean, that would have been my first recommendation.
Narratively speaking, though, as you already mentioned, Stoker bears more than a few similarities to Alfred Hitchcock's 1943 film Shadow of a Doubt. In that film, a teenage girl's uncle, but in this case, her mother's brother, named Charlie, arrives for a visit, and she soon realizes that he is the Merry Widow, a serial killer who has murdered many rich widows in recent weeks. Of course, those are the days of the Hays Code, so no incest or weird sex games in that one.
Boo.
So the basic premise was the jumping off point for Stoker, and then it veers in a wildly different direction than Hitchcock's film because we can do more wild things like that in 2013.
Sure, yeah.
This is Park Chan-wook's English language debut and is, to date, his only English language film. And of course, everyone, he has directed films like the Vengeance trilogy, Mr. Vengeance, Lady Vengeance, Old Boy, The Handmaiden, see previous episode. I actually did not see his last film, Decision to Leave. Did you see that one?
I did, yeah. It was one of my favorites from the year. I had to sit with it for a while, but it's basically a film noir love story, but it has his signature kind of nonlinear storytelling, jumps in time that make it very confusing, but like not so confusing that you can't follow the movie. Deeply romantic and hugely sexy.
Ooh. Well, I still remember from our conversation during The Handmaiden with Jenny Nulf, I still haven't seen Thirst.
Oh my God.
I know.
Grace. I'm not shaming you or guilting you, but oh, buddy, we have a time in store for us.
I know. We'll have to put it on the schedule one day, but until then, so casting for this is fun. Apparently, Carey Mulligan and Jodie Foster were reported to be in talks to play India and Evelyn, respectively.
Would have watched.
Totally would have watched. Totally fine. Okay. Full disclosure, I got this in the IMDb trivia, and I could not find an actual source for this.
Okay.
Supposedly, while Nicole Kidman was eager to work with Park Chan-wook, she turned down her part because she wished to spend more time with her kids and her husband. But he was so eager to have her play the part of Evelyn that he chose to place the setting in Nashville near her residence. And after looking at 80 different houses, they picked because Park Chan-wook envisioned a Gothic mansion for this house. And that's not exactly what we get here, but it's a big-ass, old-looking house.
Yes, apparently among the 80, he was like, bigger, like I'm actually looking for a castle. They assumed that would exist in Nashville, and it wasn't until they went location scouting that they realized, oh no, that does not exist. So this is basically what they could come up with.
Yeah, so, okay. The house they ended up using, though, was apparently 5 minutes away from her actual house in Nashville.
I couldn't find anything that said why they chose Nashville, but yes, she does say in that documentary that she was very happy to be filming in her hometown.
Well, that's apparently why, because she couldn't do it unless they filmed near her because she wanted to be close to her family. And so she started filming this like a week after she wrapped production on The Paperboy, that movie where she pees on Zac Efron.
I haven't seen it, but I love that is literally the only thing people ever reference about that movie.
I haven't seen it either, and it's the only thing I know about that movie.
There we go.
But okay, here's the weird casting bit, though. So the original actor cast in the Charlie role, who's, of course, played by Matthew Good in the final film, was Colin Firth.
Oh, so we just swapped out a single man actor?
Yes, we did, but here's the thing. Colin Firth is 18 years older than Matthew Good.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you about this, whether you felt the actor should have been a little bit older. You know, we get a specific line about how Charlie is, spoiler alert, he's the middle of the three brothers, but I mean, Dermot Mulroney's not that much older looking per se, but I guess there's something where, I don't know, I just always kind of feel like Charlie should be a slight bit older.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I mean, so here's the thing. So yeah, Matthew Good right now is 45. Colin Firth is 63. Dermot Mulroney is 60 right now. So it makes sense. But then, okay, well, what if we had Colin Firth in this role? So when we have those flashbacks of Charlie killing his younger brother, Jonathan, I feel like it would make it less disturbing because, honestly, the fact that we have someone who I want to say is under the age of 10 murdering a toddler is more disturbing to me than someone who would have been closer to the Dermot Mulroney's character's age killing a toddler.
Right. I mean, I think they could have kept the ages the same and the actor just would have looked a little bit older in the present days. But I don't know. I mean, the fact is that's not what we got. So we get Matthew Good and he looks, I guess, more age appropriate as a sexual love interest to both Nicole Kidman's Evie, but also Mia Wasikowski's India. So I think in a way it ends up being a better fit because there's less of an ick factor and more of a like, ooh, it's sexy incest. But my mind is saying, no, don't get turned on by this.
I was going to say the fact that it's a young, sexy actor makes the incest not as bad.
Correct. There you go.
I will give him this, though. I have never particularly Matthew Good has the Blando white guy face to me where I'm like, I couldn't, I know him from Watchmen. That was the first thing I saw him in.
Oh, that's not the thing to know him from.
Well, I know. but it's funny because, so peek behind the curtains, everyone, Joe and I have been talking about this, but I've been going through all 7 seasons of The Good Wife and didn't realize he's a main character in 2 seasons of that show. So
of course he is. Fucking everyone shows up on that show and I love it.
Well, and so, but literally the day I watched this, I had just watched his last episode of the show. So I was like, how fortuitous. It's Matthew Good light for me.
Right. Yeah. See, I feel like the first time I saw him was a single man. So I've always associated him with a certain queerness, even though he is not.
He's not gay, yeah.
Which is tragic because
I know, he's so attractive.
Absolutely stunning. But yeah, I don't know. There's just something very enigmatic about him, and he often tends to play these roles in my mind. I watched all 3 seasons of A Discovery of Witches, where he plays a vampire, and he's a solid fit for genre, I think.
Yeah, I actually agree. It's amazing how when you watch more things an actor is in, how they start to pop more for you.
Right.
But I think it also helps when they start taking more roles that are diverse. Although, have you ever seen that lesbian movie, Imagine Me and You, with, oh my God, it's Lena Headey and Piper Perabo?
Yeah, I have not, but I have heard about it because apparently it is most every lesbian's one of their top favorite films.
That's interesting. My husband hates it. But he's not a lesbian. But Matthew Good is one of the husbands in it.
Right. Yes.
Anyway. Okay, another thing that could have been. So Clint Mansell does the score for this movie. And I know Clint Mansell mostly from Darren Aronofsky's work. Of course, he does all those strings for Requiem for a Dream, but he's done Murder by Numbers, Doom. Doom. But he's also done a lot of Ben Wheatley's work. So he did High Rise, Rebecca, and The Earth.
Oh, okay.
The original composer on this film was none other than Philip Glass.
Yeah, when I saw that, my heart definitely broke a little bit.
I know!
And yeah, I think it would have been very different, but clearly it didn't work. Or else we would have gotten it. I
don't know, because he was replaced, and so. But here's the thing: Philip Glass's scores are amazing. The problem, quote unquote, with them is they tend to distract from anything happening on screen because they are practically characters in and of themselves.
Right. He's so strong in that way. The scores command attention, and this is all about the visuals.
Yeah, and everyone, Philip Glass, Candyman. The first time I heard of him was Notes on a Scandal, which is also...
Oh, that's a good one, too, yeah.
It's a really good movie, but, the score is... Well, I was going to say it's the most memorable part, but...
It takes over.
Cate Blanchett and Judi Dench are doing some good work in that movie.
Geez, you think? Just a little bit, yeah. I actually really, really like that one.
I do too. It was a high school movie for me, but I really, really liked it. But yeah, filming began in September 2011 in Nashville, Tennessee. Took 40 days, wrapping on October 23rd. It premiered at Sundance in January of 2013 before opening just 2 months later on March 1st. But critical reception was mostly positive. We're looking at a 70% on Rotten Tomatoes with an average score of 6.7 out of 10.
Yeah.
Metacritic is a 58 out of 100, and Letterboxd users have given it a 7.2 out of 10.
That tracks, right? It's about a 3.5 for people. It's kind of working, but it's not quite hitting the top.
Exactly. Although Empire Magazine did rank this number 6 on its list of best movies of 2013.
That's not bad.
So this release, though, I'm loath to say it was botched because I'm kind of like, how do you... Okay.
But you are saying that, is what you're saying?
Kind of. So it was given a limited theatrical release in 7 theaters on March 1st of 2013. Its widest release would be in 275 theaters 3 weeks later. It wound up grossing $1.7 million domestically and $10.4 million overseas for a worldwide gross of $12.1 million against a production budget of $12 million.
Yeah. So that's a bomb.
It's Fox Searchlight, and so it's one of the... I guess it's like, okay, you have this amazing international director, which, granted, regular audiences aren't really going to give a shit about that, because most of them are going to be like, oh, like Park Chan-wook, old boy, yeah.
Yeah, very much a niche. Like, if you know him, you would have been excited, aka me, when this film came out, but I feel like he doesn't take off within a larger kind of recognition for audiences until The Handmaiden, and even that, maybe even Decision to Leave.
Maybe so, but that's why you have Nicole Kidman on the poster for this movie.
100%, yeah.
Like, get all those old ladies in there to see this psychosexual, like, incest drama.
Again, you could have sold it as that.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I don't know if it was because they lost faith in it, or if maybe there was some kind of financing thing with distribution. I don't know, but that's what we have.
Yeah, I can't help but wonder if Fox Searchlight thought that they were going to get awards contention for this. Like, which, P.S., the fact that this doesn't get anything for production design is it's a big colossal shit.
Oh, cinematography too. I do want to actually point out Chung Hoon Chung, who does the cinematography for this and has done a lot of Chan-wook's films. So, he's done Old Boy, Lady Vengeance, Thirst, all of those films. But he also moved into American cinema because he also did the cinematography for It and Zombieland 2,
okay.
Last Night in Soho.
Oh, that actually has good cinematography.
And here's the kicker, Uncharted.
Oh, so he's moving back and forth between artsy but accessible and straightforward generic action films.
Which, I mean, look, I'd say I like Uncharted. And I think it's shot really fun, but like it's kind of a thing where it's like, oh, like you wouldn't expect. Anyway, I digress.
It's almost like we keep trying to put people into boxes, but they're creatives, and then they go and do what they want.
Yeah, and hey, he's probably doing really well doing all these high-profile films now.
I mean, I hope he's making some money, yeah.
I think so. But yeah, so that's all there really is. Not really any drama here. It was just kind of like I feel like I remember a lot of the buzz leading up to this film being a lot, but then it was just kind of like a nothing once it actually came out.
Yeah, I think when the reviews were mixed, I think that put some water on the fire.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. But
all right, well, should we dig into this? All right, so the film begins at the end. We just don't know it.
Okay, so this is one of your biggest pet peeves, Joe, but I'm going to assume it doesn't really bother you as much because we don't know it.
Yes, that fact. It isn't saying, 24 hours earlier.
Yeah.
It isn't, like, to the point where you don't even really know what's going on in this opening sequence. I think a lot of people will probably forget about it, and then they'll only remember it when she actually drives off at the end of the film. Like, oh, right, we're seeing the same things as the opening.
I also do like, because like I feel like we as an audience members, and not you and me, but like the general we, are getting, our attention spans are kind of going shorter and shorter and shorter. Yeah. So what I do like is that we are forced to watch these credits. Forced, that sounds so bad. But the image freezes every time an actor's name pops up.
Can I tell you? So this is the first time that I've actually watched this on a physical release. I kept thinking my disc was skipping. It's like, motherfucker, how am I supposed to watch this movie? It's freezing every 10 seconds.
I will say I don't think the image freezes when Jackie Weaver's name pops up and when Nicole Kidman's name pops up. And I don't know if that was an intentional decision or, I mean, I feel like it would have to be if all the other it freezes on all the other names, but
right.
I don't know.
Internet sleuthery.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, so in this opening sequence, which is, yes, a little bit herky-jerky, we're stopping and starting over the credits. We're watching India, who is played by Mia Wasikowska, and she's standing on the side of the road. She's moving through bloody foliage, and she is delivering a voiceover, which, you know, it's a little bit purple prosy. It's not bad, but, you know, if you listen, she's basically giving you a hint about the nature of her coming out, her sexual blossoming, which will be the center of this text. But also, I do like the fact that in this voiceover, we're embedding the fact that she is wearing her mother's blouse and her father's belt. So we're cueing audiences right away. This is all about family and what you take away from other people as you become an individual.
Vin Diesel would never.
Bitches, come.
I mean, yeah, and to become an adult is to become free. So, you know, we're laying out like the whole thesis of the film, right, in this monologue. What do we think about India's, do I want to say ability? Like, she has the ability to sense things. Like, it's... I don't know. Like, do you think this is really crucial to this character?
I mean, I don't even clock that. I look at her as an expert marksman. She seems incredibly introverted to the point where she's maybe paying attention to smaller details, and that comes off as self-awareness. But yeah, I don't see it as a huge focal point of the film.
It's because, you know, she's like, okay, I can sense things that others cannot. It's like sensory overload. So we get like moments because everyone, the Foley work in this film
off the charts,
amazing. And so we'll have like a lot of sound stuff or tasting things or visuals where it's like it's all enhanced because we're hearing it, seeing it, whatever, through India's POV. I'm thinking specifically of with that boiled egg rolling across the table.
Oh my god, yeah, the loudest boiled egg in cinema history.
Yeah, and so it's kind of like, it's really cool. And I guess I kept thinking it was maybe going to play a larger role into why she was being bullied in school. But it's not that it even
not
comes,
exactly.
Yeah, it's just kind of like, oh, okay, it's just a character trait that she has, but it's not necessarily, to me, crucial to the film as a whole.
Right. I did find a piece, but I didn't actually capture the name of it because I didn't find a ton useful in the actual piece. But this person was arguing that the whole film is her coming of age and, you know, obviously coming out as a bit of a serial killer.
Sure.
And they associated all of this because so much of the film is her reaching a kind of sexual maturity as she becomes an adult. And this idea that as teenagers, with our hormones raging, we are far more attuned to things, right? Like, so first touches, first experiences, like so much of this film is India discovering who she is, what she likes, and what she wants to become. And if you read that as, oh, okay, so she's just more keenly aware of all of that because she's at that age where she is blossoming.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah.
Blah, 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 blah.
I don't know. I thought it was interesting, but I don't know it's entirely supported by the text. The visuals, perhaps, but here's the ironic thing. A lot of this movie is connoted through the visuals. Like the script doesn't necessarily spell it out until we get to the end of the film, and then everything is just spelled out for us.
Right. And I'm going to take a wild guess that is something that doesn't work for you.
I don't love it. So much of the movie is working on an intellectual adult level, and then it feels like the end is, hey, dum-dums in the back, do you understand how all this came to be?
Yeah, no, I can see that. But yeah, so we move through these credits, and again, they're already visually striking. You know, oh, look, India walks through the road, and then, oh, the credits disappear as she walks through them. But of course, we culminate with the big overhead shot of a cloche, new word learned.
I hate it.
On top of a birthday cake as the candles go out.
Yes. Okay, so we're setting the stage for birthdays. Birthdays are very important in the film, and we more or less open the film proper on this. So India is running around these absolutely palatial fucking grounds of the Stoker property, and she's looking for her birthday gift. And we will come to learn that it is always in a box, it's wrapped up nicely, and it usually contains a pair of shoes, saddle shoes specifically, of varying sizes over time as she grows.
Are saddle shoes the shoe equivalent of milk in, like, infantilizing a character?
More or less. It's something that a child would wear. And it's very obvious when we actually leave the Stoker estate and realize, oh, this film is meant to be set in modern times and not the 50s or 60s. And this bitch is still wearing them saddle shoes and everybody else is dressed normally.
Literally the only time that I'm like, oh, right, this is modern times is when we're at school.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this has a kind of, we talked about it on Patreon, Cobweb has a certain weird timelessness quality to it, right? And I'm always fascinated when films do this because at no point does anyone say, oh, well, you freaks all dress like you're from the 50s. What's going on up at that house? It's just we're led to believe that this is maybe a kind of 50s diner, Riverdale, Twin Peaks world.
I mean,
until she goes to school and then you're just like, oh, yeah, okay, it's just a thing that her family does. They are a little bit
Weaver
kooky.
dies in a phone booth in 2013.
I mean, I was in Montreal for Fantasia a couple of weeks ago, and I definitely stood beside a phone booth. So they do exist, folks.
God,
it's just,
I remember when the last phone booth in New York was taken down. It was like a big article, like a whole deal. Maybe it was after this movie, though, actually. So maybe I'm wrong. But
maybe.
Yeah, I agree. There is that timelessness to it. But then I also wonder if maybe it's because it's showing a part of the world, specifically like rural Tennessee, that I'm like, some people do kind of live like that, you know, where they don't where they're out kind of not in the middle of nowhere, I guess, but they live on properties like this. They don't have like all the advanced technology, and maybe I'm just being like classist by being like, what's going on here?
We're not suggesting that these people are hillbillies or anything, because they're obviously incredibly wealthy, so they're doing something that involves the larger world. But you're not wrong. This does feel incredibly isolated. It feels like a world of their own. I saw a couple of people in reviews reference that this feels almost like Grey Gardens.
Oh, well, because sometimes you look at the house and wow, this is honestly the inside of the house is very pretty, but like the outside, like the paint is chipping, it looks old as fuck, and it's kind of like ugh, and like the grounds are not kept very well.
Yeah. You know, they obviously have a couple of people who are looking after the property, but you also very much get the impression that this is an insulated world. You know, in that featurette on the physical release, they do talk about, obviously, the importance of birds, but more so specifically looking at the house as a kind of gilded cage. So they've kept up the house because that's where they spend all of their time and energy, but then it's also kind of rotting around them as a reflection of the shit that's going on within their personalities.
Yeah, exactly.
So speaking of, it's India's birthday. She's looking for this gift. And meanwhile, her mother, Evie, played by Nicole Kidman, is too busy screaming, Richard, no! Because we are about to learn that the patriarch of the family, who will not really be seen until about an hour into this movie, has died on India's 18th birthday. It's
so funny because in the credits, they list the cast in order of appearance. So Dermot Mulroney's name is obviously towards the end, but I was like, but we see his photo at this funeral.
Yeah. Yeah, but I feel it's so fleeting if you're not paying attention, which I admittedly was not at this moment. I was trying to work through my notes of how do I describe the opening of this movie? It's so scattershot and things are happening. You know, I've got, okay, we're at a funeral. India's wearing these fucking saddle shoes. She sees a man in the distance, but he disappears when she turns away. This is, of course, Matthew Good, Uncle Charlie. But there's just a bunch of shit happening, and you don't really know what to pay attention to. So I completely miss that we get to see a picture of Robert, and it's not until we see him and India hunting in the reeds that I was like, whoa, right, Mulroney, hey! Yeah. I'm going to give a quick shout out to costumers Kurt and Bart. They do not go by their last names, but they are responsible for the costuming, obviously, in the film. And they were very deliberate in distinguishing India from her mother. So all of India's outfits are symmetrical. So you will see that all of them are exactly, they match on both sides, whereas all of Evie's are asymmetrical. So she and her mother are almost diametrically opposed.
Yeah. And honestly, like, this is something it's not, I want to see more Nicole Kidman because I like Nicole Kidman, although that is absolutely a factor in it. I just wish, I wish there was more of this relationship between Evie and India in this. I mean, we get it. You know, they were not close. She hunted with her father. Whatever. We'll get at this in her big climactic emotional monologue. But it still feels like there's just something more that I need from Nicole Kidman. Because I still feel like by the end of the film, I'm like, what? I don't truly understand this character.
I think part of it is that we understand mostly her relationship with India. We don't always understand the nature of her relationship with her dead husband and why she is so quick to embrace the sexy brother-in-law who shows up, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it's odd to me how welcoming she is with Uncle Charlie, but then, you know, she does make reference to the fact, I think at one point she tells India, you know, your father and I weren't always like this. We weren't always so distant. So if we look at India as almost a proxy of her dad, like she was really daddy's little girl and there was no emotional connection with mom, you could understand that the two of them just don't talk, and Evie is really just off by herself in this fucking big house.
And I get it. That's I mean, like that goes back as far as fucking Cinderella, although I guess in that one's an evil stepmother, but it's like, yeah, she was jealous because her husband loved the daughter more than her. So I can fill in that blank myself. It's just not, and I don't even need it spelled out to me. I just wish there was more.
You want a bit more.
Yeah, I just want a bit more. That's all I want.
100%. Yeah. I think that's where you look at that runtime and you say, oh, I do want a couple more minutes, because Evie is a fascinating character, but we're often seeing her almost filtered through India's perspective.
Yeah.
And as a result, we only see the kind of bad parts of Evie. So we don't understand who she is as an independent woman.
And that's what you're saying, right? She's a supporting character. The movie, she is not the protagonist of this film.
No, but it always becomes a struggle in movies like this where the characters are so rich. Like, there's such interesting thematics going on in this movie. And you think, okay, this movie also doesn't have a huge cast. So I want to know more about each of these people because there's only about 4 of them.
Well, because half the time, anytime someone shows up, they get killed a scene later.
It's so true. I kind of love it. This movie is not afraid to kill people without, you know, oh, there's no real big buildup. It's not, oh, they're here for half the movie and then we get rid of them because now you care about them. It's, oh, you're interested in this person? Sorry, they're dead.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking
One such person. Yeah, so let's meet the housekeeper, Mrs. McGarrick, who is played by Phyllis Somerville. And she's obviously a bit of a glue that's keeping this house together. So we do see other women in the kitchen. They're gossiping about the mysterious circumstances that Robert died in. And you're like, okay, I'm going to put that away for later.
And India's doing some ASMR with that boiled egg.
Oh my God. It is wild. Literally have a note here. It's just, that egg. Why is that egg so loud? I love it. But, Ms. McGarrick also gives us some insight into how the house worked before. Oh, I think I said Robert. It's actually Richard. How did Richard work? So he would, yes, give this gift of new shoes. It was a bit of a scavenger hunt every year, except this year was different. For her 18th birthday, India got a key instead of a pair of shoes.
Okay, so... Okay, maybe we say this.
Spoiler alert, the shoes are not from Daddy. They were from the uncle.
Yeah, exactly. And so she gets a key in this box, which, put that in your back pocket.
I mean, I do love that a large portion of this film is a bit of a scavenger hunt for her discovering who she is and how she fits into this family. And that mirrors the process that we as an audience have of trying to figure out what the fuck is going on.
Yeah. And I'm sure we'll have plenty to say about how satisfying these answers are in the third act of this film.
Well, there is that, yeah. Okay, so at the funeral, she is formally introduced to Uncle Charlie, who is played by Matthew Good, and we're also learning little tidbits about Evie. So Evie at one point talks about how India hates being touched. And you can tell that this is less about India and more about how she wishes she could touch her daughter.
Yeah.
And also how she resents the fact that India was a skilled hunter who, you know, she had a kind of secret relationship with Richard where he would stuff everything that India killed because he was so enamored with her. And Evie was obviously not a part of any of this.
Absolutely. And yeah, one thing I do love about Evie, she has a lot of these like, really passive aggressive, like, but not like
God,
the tone. Yes. Well, because she's like, oh, she hates to be touched. I'm her mother. What a curse. Okay. But like, we have that moment later, though, where she's like, she talks about something that Richard used to, Richard used to cook. And she's like, don't you, you weren't born yet. Sorry.
Jesus. It's like, lady, you're talking about how you wish you were closer to your daughter, but all you want to do is make cunty asides.
Yeah. And
you can't have it both ways.
You preferred your husband before you had your daughter.
Because he was all yours. I do think that that's one of the insights you have to really try to unpack. That Evie just... She feels like not just a prisoner in this house, but also that she has been left behind by the people who are supposed to love her, which I think explains why she tries to instigate a sexual relationship with Charlie.
Yeah, and part of me, on a first watch for this, a part of this was like, my personal bias. So, of course, I love Nicole Kidman. I never really particularly liked Mia Wasikowska, and I think we talked about this in our Crimson Peak episode from earlier this year, but I always just found her kind of bland. I didn't think that she was I didn't think the roles she was picking were doing her any services, you know? Like, I knew her from Alice in Wonderland.
So fascinating.
I did think she was good in The Kids Are All Right, but then I didn't see like Only Lovers Left Alive until like later. So I actually do like her a lot now. I never watched In Treatment, which I think is what made her famous.
Okay.
But nevertheless, I actually did appreciate her more on a rewatch, 10 years later, because I like the actress more now.
Right. It's funny that you're having this kind of epiphany. The more that you see someone, the more you tend to like them. I do think that it's gaining an appreciation of what they're doing. I'm in agreement with you. I think that India, she's a character who holds audiences at arm's length because she herself doesn't entirely know who she is or what she's doing. Like, if you look at this movie as almost a coming of age film, a lot of her is she's just this introverted teenager who doesn't know who the fuck she is. And over the course of the film, she starts to come alive. But a lot of this performance is very, short clipped responses, not a lot of big emotional moments. This character is almost a bit sullen, but then when you get to the end, you're like, oh, it's because she's a psychopath. But that's where, and again, we're talking about the queer connection. Oh, it was the only queer connection for this film, Wentworth Miller. But I actually think a lot of India's journey reads as, even though she's not queer in the way we are queer, she is quite literally queer. She's queer, yeah. I was going to try to justify that a lot of this movie is, we're dealing with incest. Incest is inherently queer because it is not normal.
Right.
But then there's also, India as a bit of a queer figure because she is such an outsider, even I would argue within her own family.
100%. Well, even her mother doesn't know who she is, right? Oh, but Charlie does because he's queer too.
There is that. Yeah.
And you have to believe that's why Richard didn't want them to meet, because I think he saw in India a lot of Charlie.
Well, do we want to wait until the hunting scene, or do we just want to talk about how this is Baby Dexter?
Oh my God, it is Baby Dexter. Okay, let's wait till the hunting scene. Let's go through this shit.
Okay, yes. So India spends most of this wake trying to dodge Charlie because she is clearly put off by him, and he is fascinated with her. So he's essentially following her through her own house. We get this great extended tracking shot where they're weaving around each other, and then she dodges him, and they finally have their first encounter on the stairs, which is one of the reasons why this particular house was selected out of the 80, because they needed this winding staircase so that they could really explore these themes of not just like being trapped and being in a cage, but also you get these great angles, and then you can really reference the power play between these two characters.
Which is spelled out quite literally in Wentworth's screenplay when Charlie's like, do you know why you feel at a disadvantage right now? Because you're standing below me.
Yeah, this normally wouldn't work for me because it's just too on the nose. Like, I don't need you to spell it out for me.
Right.
But I like it that we do this, and then later on, there's another sequence where she just immediately assumes that vantage point, so she is more powerful than him, and we don't say it then.
100%. I'm also really glad that you mentioned the camera weaving, because I'm not even kidding, Joe. I wrote in my note, camera weaves for days.
Some of the ways that we shoot dinner sequences in this movie, I feel like I've never seen them shot this way before.
It makes it, that's why, like, even though, and we'll talk about it more, but the script is kind of the weakest part for me. Like, the way the camera moves in this movie is so hypnotic and it's so engrossing that I don't even care, because I'm just having so much fun literally watching what's on screen.
Yeah, it is kind of wild, because sometimes when I want to be that really passive audience member, I don't like a really busy moving camera, because it actually calls attention to itself, right? It's the craft on display. You're making me notice that this isn't just an organic. I can't just sort of blend into what's happening on the screen, because my eyes are constantly noticing, like, oh, okay, that's a great tracking shot. Oh, we're pushing in. Oh, okay, we're doing this other thing.
Right.
But here I do feel like it really works, because it lends itself to the thriller vibes of the film for me. Like, we're searching for things. We're trying to make connections between these characters, and the camera is actively seeking or pushing us away from that.
That's the thing. It adds to your unsettled atmosphere in this type of a film, 100%. Like, you can never sit still, which means you can never be like...
You can't just relax into it.
Yeah, exactly.
So one final piece about the house, I'm going to credit, I mentioned the production design. It is done by Therese Deprez. And folks, you might know some of her work from things like Black Swan.
Oh, shit. Okay. I wonder if Clint Mansell recommended her, or, if she recommended Clint Mansell after Philip Glass left.
Could happen. But, yeah, so obviously she's dressing all of this set, and she's working with the costumers. Like, it sounded like it was a very collaborative thing where director Park would come in and he storyboarded the entire fucking movie, but then he's incredibly open to suggestions. He wants people to be like, they can bring their ideas in. So one of her big things was this kind of green house. So the house was not this color. It was not a spearmint green, but they took the chance on it. And part of the reason they wanted to do it is to simulate this idea of a terrarium. So you're bringing nature inside the house, because these characters are trapped indoors so often that they've almost replicated an outdoor experience within the home. And it also plays on this idea of the hunter and the hunted, because, of course, when we see India and her father out in the grass later. And then finally, green, the color of envy, which, of course, is what Evie is all over in this movie.
Isn't that the color, like, analyses of things? I'm like, okay, so, like, green can be nature, but also envy, and, like, green. Okay, whatever. It's good and bad.
100%, yeah. And I'll confess, I'm a sucker for doing color analysis in the same way that I like to do hair and costuming. Right. So, yeah, I will come up with, let's talk about Charlie's mustard yellow sweater later.
My God. Also, speaking of those costumes, that costume guy knows exactly what kind of pants to put on Matthew Good to make his ass pop.
The costumes in this movie are fucking amazing. And I want everything in Matthew Good's wardrobe.
So do I.
Yeah. I mean, I love that you're like, his ass popped. I'm like, I want my ass to pop like that. How do I get that?
Well, that was what I was insinuating without spelling outright.
Oh, I thought you were just like appreciating a fine ass.
Oh, I am appreciating his fine ass, but saying I want that I want my ass, my mediocre ass, to look like that fine ass.
Excuse me, costume designer, how do I go from cottage cheese to bounce a quarter off of it? Okay, sorry, we're still at this funeral. So, yeah, they have this kind of tete-a-tete. He says, I'm going to stick around, but only if you're okay with it, because I want you to be part of the decision-making. And you can already see, like, if you were a conservative and you looked at this weird relationship, like this creepy, incestuous, this is grooming behavior 101, right?
I was going to say, because it sounds very patronizing what he's saying to her, but he's manipulating her.
100%, yeah. But in a weirdly endearing way by the end of the film, right? Because he really just wants her to embrace what he already sees in her, that her father has tried to repress in her.
Okay, this is a question I had. Because he's been in this institution
for his entire life.
So why was he so obsessed with India when he hadn't even met? Maybe that is the thing. Like, he hadn't met her, but I'm just kind of like, I don't know where this obsession came from.
Yeah, it's not spelled out in enough detail for us to understand, so I could only infer that Richard has gone to see him at some point or other people, and they have maybe talked about India.
Sure, but then why, like, is it like, okay, you can maybe say, oh, maybe he feels guilty for murdering his brother, so he's looking for a new, younger... Well, exactly, right? Like, he clearly doesn't give a shit about Jonathan.
I think it's, no one else in my family understands me or accepts me, but this person who sounds very similar to me could be that person. How can I help her to realize her quote-unquote potential?
Yeah, okay, that's fair.
And part of that potential includes digging into this nice soft earth that is all around the property because we are going to be burying bodies here.
It's perfect for burying bodies.
He's not even subtle. He literally wakes her up like, oh, I'm just digging up the garden, preparing to throw a couple people in here later.
Hold on, let me go talk to Mrs. McGarrick real quick.
Literally that, Yeah, so India does a ton of spying in this movie. She's always eavesdropping. I think that lends itself to the kind of Hitchcockian nature where you're only hearing enough to get you to a point of suspicion, but you don't know the whole story until later.
And Hitchcock was no stranger to voyeuristic themes.
Sure, and birds, taxidermied birds, Trace.
Oh my god, I know.
Okay, so yes, we see Charlie having a conversation with Mrs. McGarrick, and then she doesn't turn up for work the next day. I'm sure she's fine.
Sure, she's fine. I honestly, like, I know... I kind of wish that the Mrs. McGarrick and the Jackie Weaver character, I kind of wish they were just combined into the same character.
Oh, just to give a little more screen time?
Yeah. And granted, though, I love Jackie Weaver, and I love Phyllis Somerville. I think she's really good in this, too. I actually know her from, oh, God, did you ever watch that Laura Linney show, The Big C?
No, but I heard really good things.
Yeah, well, she's in the first season.
Okay.
Bonus points if you can guess what happens to her and why she's not in the next couple seasons, but...
What does the Big C stand for?
Oh, my God. But yeah, no, this is fine.
It's cancer, by the way.
Yeah, it's cancer. It's just the big cunt.
Oh, my God. But also would watch that show.
I would watch that if it was just Laura Linney being the Big C.
Oh my god. I think that's her other... Didn't she have some other TV show where she was just like a huge bitch to people?
Honestly, possibly. And if that's the case, I want to see it because I love Laura Linney.
Oh my god, yeah. We're going to have a bunch of people who will tell us what it is after the fact. But yeah, there was like a 2-season run where she was just like a huge asshole in an office. And,
yeah, I guess I should probably... watch Ozark. I never watched Ozark. Whoops.
No, thank you.
That's fine.
Oh, I'm thinking of Laura Dern. Thinking of Laura Dern. I love it. You know what? I got there in the end, though.
Well, I think Laura Linney needs to be the same amount of queer icon that Laura Dern is.
You know what? All the Lauras.
All the Lauras, yes.
Okay, so meanwhile, even though our housekeeper has gone missing and we're very perturbed, no, we're not. Nobody could fucking care about Mrs. McGarrett until we need to eat. And then suddenly we do care that she hasn't turned up for work. Oh, but in the meantime, Evie's like, hey, we should spend time together since it's just the two of us who live in this giant fucking house now. Let's go get ice cream. And you're just like, Evie, she is a teenager. She is not a 5-year-old girl.
Okay, you say that, but then literally like 3 scenes from now, we're going to see her eating the 2 most like enormous scoops of ice cream in the fucking basement.
This is true. My husband watched the movie with me, and one of his very few comments on the entire film was, that is a giant ice cream cone.
You can tell him, I have it in bold in my notes, what the fuck with this ice cream? But again, more of Evie's passive aggressiveness. What are Mrs. McGarrick's gone? What in the world are we supposed to do? I'm not much in the kitchen.
Yes, Evie. Way to make it all about you. So Evie ends up going off with Uncle Charlie on a drive after noticing how young he is. And in their absence, India searches his bag and she finds her birthday box. So this is the first clue that, maybe something more was going on with those birthday gifts than we were led to believe. Or you just assume, like I did on a first watch, that Charlie had stolen the box.
Or it's like, Harry Potter. There's a wand in the box. You're a wizard, India.
Right. Except that it's a knife or a pair of gardening shears, and you're a murderer,
India.
Okay, so we get our first significant dinner of the movie. When they return, we learn that Uncle Charlie is a pretty good chef because apparently he studied under a French chef. No, he did not. Pay attention to that name, folks.
Yep.
Yeah, he makes them a lovely dinner, and they got ice cream, so they ask India to take the ice cream downstairs to Chekhov's freezer. And then, yeah, we have this dinner, and Evie, again, very passive-aggressively, I can speak French, but I never get to use it or go anywhere.
I need a movie about this character. I need this movie called Evelyn.
She's a huge bitch.
I just watched the Joan is awful Black Mirror, so the Evelyn is awful.
There we go, right? Okay, so this dinner has some of the funkiest camera work I have ever seen. We are actively pushing between these people as we're still continuing with the passive-aggressive dialogue, the no, thank you of it all.
And weaving around Matthew Good's head constantly, again, weaves for days.
Do you think that this is just meant to suggest it's all kind of overwhelming, like his presence is intoxicating?
I guess, because it's almost like he's the pivot point for the camera.
Right, that is true.
Or maybe Park Chan-wook was like, man, dinner scenes are so boring. How can I make them less boring?
I don't think it's that, because to me, I mean,
and we love dinner
I'm just
scenes,
laying all my cards on the table. I love hair. I love costumes. I love a fucking dinner scene because if a movie has dinner in it, like anything where people are forced to sit around a table, this is when all of the shit comes out.
Oh yeah, everyone go listen to our Patreon episode on Amazon Prime's Dead Ringers series, because that show, I want to say, has about 7 dinner scenes in it.
Oh my god, and they're all so fucking good.
So good! Because dinner scenes basically are a magnet for conflict.
Well, yeah, because you're basically trapped at the table and it's so close. And what else are you going to do except eat and converse? And when you're conversing, it's often with people you don't want to be having conversation with.
Yep.
And that's when the secrets come out.
Yeah. Speaking of secrets, well, actually, it's not even a secret, but this wine that they are drinking, okay, I think this is the creepiest line of the movie to me. So besides when India eats all of her food and he's like, we practically licked it clean.
Which, telling a teenage girl who probably has body issues, maybe don't comment on how little or much she eats.
Exactly. But also when you're letting her taste the wine and you're like, 1994, the year you were born. It's like,
You might as well just say, good year, really ripe, things have come up well, blossomed, you might say. He's staring at her so intently, he looks like he wants to gobble her.
Well, because he says something about the wine where he's like, oh yeah, like they're so young, they're not ready to be opened yet. And it's like, okay, so you're being you're anti-pedophilia, which is good. You're just pro-incest, which is bad.
But here's the thing. Knowing what we know of this film, do you think that he actually wants to fuck her? Or do you think that he just wants her to come into her own like him?
Yeah, it feels more like a kindred spirit thing than it does an act. But again, so much of this does feel...
It's sexy vibes.
Yeah, erotic isn't the right word, because I feel like erotic has a positive connotation.
I mean, I'm not going to lie. I found all of this deeply hot.
It is, but that's weird.
Okay. I mean, I'm not even going to fight you because I don't disagree, but I do love the fact that this movie is basically saying, yeah, we have a romantic love triangle. It just happens to be between a mother, her daughter, and then the uncle.
Which I do wonder if that's like, I mean, look, we talk about this all the time, right? Where a studio gets cold feet because like, ooh, like this is maybe not going to, but I'm like, did you read the script for what you had? Like,
when you gave him the $12 million, did you realize you were making a sexy incest movie?
Exactly. Yay, incest.
Yay. Okay, well, let's leave the Stoker estate behind briefly so we can accompany India to school, where we have randomly a couple of relatively famous younger actors that I never realized were in this movie.
Lucas Till.
Yeah, being an absolute fucking asshole. I love that he hits on her, and then when she kind of rebuffs him or doesn't engage, he threatens her. And you're just like, why are teenage boys?
The fact that this character does not die is really upsetting to me.
Yeah. So he's garbage, but it's okay because we've got Uncle Charlie to distract everybody. and mostly specifically the teenage girls, because they are treating him like he is a member of the fucking Beatles or something. They are losing their goddamn minds at his hot butt and also his convertible.
Yeah, they want to lick him just like India licks those massive ice cream scoops.
This is true. I mean, who doesn't, though?
Yeah.
So, yeah, she is not taking the bait. She does not want his car rides home. She does not want his yellow umbrella from the rain, even when he tries to say things like, put on some dry clothes and come play with us when he goes to play tennis with her mom.
Joe, but you mentioned the yellow umbrella. Is there any significance to the color yellow in this film?
I mean, we've talked about yellow. I can't remember what episode it was, but you went on a deep dive about all the different ways it could suggest things like madness or rot. And I'm going to choose the latter of those options, where I think this is a kind of insidious illness where he is trying to, I guess, infect her with it, right? Like, he is a symbol of badness that has come into their life, into this world of greens and blues and reds, with the yellow and the rot.
Well, that's the thing, because yellow is like, out of all the colors you just mentioned, I think yellow stands out the most.
It's also madness, so he was, as we'll learn, in an institution for his homicidal tendencies.
Womp womp.
Womp womp. And let's introduce somebody who is very concerned about where he's been. This would be Auntie Jin, played by Jackie Weaver. I love how she just shows up in this movie, tour de fucking force. You know, it's Jackie Weaver. If you don't know her, you're probably like, meh, it's not that big a deal. If you know her, it's a big fucking deal with Auntie Jin. When she shows up at the door, you're like, oh, shit's about to go down.
It's so interesting, because she's an Australian actress. Oh, that's the funny thing, actually. Matthew Good, Mia Wasikowska. God damn it. Wait, let me double check on Matthew Good really quick.
He's British.
British, right. Nicole Kidman, Mia Wasikowska, and Jackie Weaver, all three Australian women in this Nashville, Tennessee movie.
Yeah.
I first heard of her. I think she got an Oscar nomination, or at least a lot of critical acclaim for that movie, Animal Kingdom. Right. But I feel like since then, she just keeps, like, she pops up for like a scene or two. And it's funny because her role in this reminds me a lot of her role in that 2020 Grudge reboot, where she pops up for like a scene and then she gets like a really good joke moment, which also happens in this movie when we cut to her in that shitty ass hotel. And then she dies.
Yeah, and folks, we just talked about her in our Bird Box Patreon audio commentary last month, so things are really coming up, Jackie Weaver.
Yep.
Yeah, so she shows up, and I love the immediate body language change in Evie. So we sit down for a second dinner that Uncle Charlie has prepared, and it's not as though Auntie Jin is saying anything particularly offensive, but Evie's reactions are, she's so defensive, right? Like, everything that Auntie Jin is saying is like it's a personal attack on her.
She says that. She's like, you're sitting here attacking me. I'm like, bitch, she is just asking you some questions.
Not. She's asking if she can have a private conversation with you after dinner.
And she's like, I just want to talk about maybe how weird it is that you're staying here, that Charlie is staying here with you, which, to be clear, is weird.
Yeah, because in a way, I mean, not in a way, in a very obvious way, Uncle Charlie has taken over as the patriarch of the family. We are acting like everything is normal, but this guy that we didn't know existed and or has never been a part of our lives is suddenly living here full time?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Auntie Jin is rightfully a little alarmed, but also because she clearly understands what his deal is. So after dinner, because she doesn't want to stay there, she's going to go to a hotel, and Charlie makes a very deliberate effort to find out the explicit name of that hotel. And I love when she gets in that cab and she goes, is there another motel in this town? And
then smash cut to her sitting in the corner of this, like, shitty ass motel.
Disgusting motel.
I honestly, I wish I could have seen what the other hotel looked like. It sounded really fancy.
Sure.
Because I feel like there would have been better, like, security there.
Maybe. Yeah, so interestingly enough, this movie does a bit of sleight of hand magic. So she will comment when she dials to the front desk that she can't find her cell phone, but we actually never see her handle her cell phone. We never see Charlie take it. Mm-hmm. But, we default assume that when he was near her, he grabbed it from her so that he would force her to come out and use the payphone.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we start to crosscut between a couple of different storylines for this next sequence.
So much going on here. Like, literally, we're crossing between the three main characters. We've got Evie, Correct. India, and Charlie and all this shit.
Yeah, so India is going down to get some ice cream, which we all know, like, duh, this is where Mrs. McGarrick's body is.
Yeah.
The fact that she didn't see it the first time she went to put the ice cream down there is the big surprise. So she's going down there. We've got Evie bringing red wine to Charlie's room and finding that he's not there or he's not answering. And then, yes, we've got Auntie Jen making this phone call in the most isolated payphone box in all of Tennessee.
Also, I love, so when Evie goes into Charlie's room, what's on his TV but like a nature show of a vulture eating a carcass?
Mm-hmm. That was apparently Park Chan-wook's decision, so that was him trying to bring more of the birds into the mix.
Oh, I thought it was just more like on-the-nose symbolism.
Well, it's also that, yeah. So, this is where, yes, we discover Mrs. McGarrick's body is in the freezer, and then we get to see poor Auntie Jen. I love the slowness of this, the deliberateness of this. Charlie knows that she's not going anywhere, so he just slowly walks up, he opens the door, he walks in, closes the door, and then strangles her to death with the belt.
Again, though, more camera... Well, this is more of a swoop than a weave, but like as he undoes his belt, the camera starts on the right side of his waist, and as he pulls the belt out, we swing around to the right side of his waist before he walks into that. Oh, it's so fun.
It's interesting, right? We're so used to seeing people brandishing guns and knives and that kind of stuff, and here, it's a very intimate. It's almost a part of your body, right? Like we're actively using weapons that we can just carry around on our waist innocuously.
And to be good, because this is the first murder that we actually see in the film. This is good. Mm-hmm. We will get a death later with this belt that I think is one of the best deaths I've seen in a movie.
It's fantastic. And again, folks, you thought the cracking egg was good Foley? Yeah. But first, let's do some damage to an asshole trace. So we cut to the next morning. India's back at school, and she stabs Pitts in the hand because he suggests that her mom is stroking her uncle because her name is Stoker. So it's Stoker. Right? This is the level of intelligent insults that high school boys can come up with.
But it's okay because we have a really nice gentleman who's going to save India from these bullies after she stabs Pitts.
Yes, this would be the iconically named Whip Taylor, played by Alden Ehrenreich.
Alden Ehrenreich. Honestly, like, I don't think I did not know this was him when I saw this. Did not know this was
him. I don't even think I knew who this was when I saw this.
No, I didn't either. I mean, like everyone, of course, Alden Ehrenreich is Solo Star Wars story. I guess he was famous for Supernatural a bit.
Okay, we talked about him recently because I remember having to phonetically write out his name before.
Oh yeah. Well, Blue Jazz Man, Hail Caesar. He wasn't Cocaine Bear. Oh, he's an Oppenheimer. Holy shit! God damn it.
Okay, so it would have been Cocaine Bear that we talked about.
We talked about him in Cocaine Bear, yes.
Okay. Yeah, so Whip is a nice boy. He defends her. He's very chivalrous. But even as she's interacting with him, she is flashing back to discovering Mrs. McGarrick's body in the freezer. But what I thought was interesting about this is that this isn't from the second time that she got the ice cream out trace. This is from the first time that she put the ice cream in the freezer. So she knew that Mrs. McGarrick's body was in there when she made that giant fucking ice cream cone.
Yep. And she's just like, oh, that's a strange thing. All right, ice cream.
So this is the movie telling us there's something wrong with India. It's not just, oh, she likes to shoot things because that's what she and her dad did. She is not disturbed at all by casual acts of violence, and she is not disturbed by finding bodies in the freezer. Okay, so we hop back at home, and even though we had an earlier scene where Charlie told Evie he couldn't play piano, he seems very comfortable getting down for a overly sexualized duet.
This movie... There's no actual sex scenes in this movie, but there are.
This is the first of two sex scenes in this movie.
Yes, but he's edging her in this scene
100%.
because she's about to basically cum her panties, and he just stops.
It's amazing.
Yo, they are just playing. I mean, good. They're playing the piano very well, but they are just playing the piano in this scene. It is. This is erotic.
It is so well done. I love the moment where, he's playing with her, right? So she's playing the piano. He sits down beside her. He starts to match her. And we as an audience know that he has previously said he can't play. So it's a surprise. But to her, she's just kind of bemused by it. And then we start to change the tone. We start to play different songs, different genres, and so on. And then the part where he reaches around her, almost like a caress, to play the other part. And we are focusing on her face as she is feeling things that she has never felt before. And then, just in case you thought the movie was too subtle, we actually see the CGI spider that we saw earlier crawls up her leg and disappears down her skirt.
I was going to say, okay, so is CGI spider another metaphor thing where it's like, oh, this is like Charlie infiltrating her life and her womanhood?
100%. Yeah. The sickness is inside her, but also she has been awakened. Like, this is, if you read it as a sexual coming-of-age maturity film, this is the start of her process, right? Like, we started with glasses of wine, and we're going to escalate to the point where
she gets spiders in her cooch.
I mean, he basically just had a sex scene with her, and then we're going to move on to two other highly sexualized, violent encounters. So this is just sex, but we're going to start to add violence into the mix.
Yeah, we are.
Okay, so unfortunately, he is playing mindfuck games because he's got to keep Evie satisfied as well. So India later sees her mother and uncle dancing and even kissing in the dining room, but when we see Charlie's face, he is focused on the fact that India is running away, even as Evie is basically trying to put the moves on him.
Yeah. I actually would. So again, we have a lot of more, circling camera work in this scene, but we're in Evie's POV up to a certain point because there's a part where she leaves, she walks outside the house and starts spying at them from like the window.
Yep.
But we don't like establish that. So this is a part where we're watching Charlie and Evie dancing, and all of a sudden Evie's just like in the window. I was like, oh, that's fun. Like,
yeah, and it's actually happened before. So at one point during the funeral, when Charlie is following India, she goes outside and then comes back around in and sits at the bottom of the staircase, and he wouldn't have had time to get up to the top of the stairs, and yet he just magically appears there. So people are actively jumping around. Like, we're defying the actual laws of gravity and physics here, and I think that's part of the film's just gentle interest in like the supernatural, where some of this is just hyper stylized and a little bit fake.
It's very ethereal.
Yeah. So India has run away from home. This is where we're in full Twin Peaks 1950s mode. So she runs to the Rockets diner and she sees Motorcycle Kid Whip, who dismisses his boys so that he can accompany his best girl on a date to the playground.
Yes. I love your Twin Peaks reference too, because you've also got like a lot of, I mean, on top of the diner, but like the song that Evie and Charlie are dancing to is Summer Wine by Nancy Sinatra and Lee Hazelwood. And it's also like, we will hear this song a lot every time we're with Evie.
I actually really like that touch because it has an old-timey romanticism to it that I think is very appropriate.
I think it also, like, it adds to Evie's characters. Like, she's fondly remembering a time that has passed that she will never get back.
Right. Do you think that, I mean, I know we've speculated about Evie because we don't really have as much information about her. Do you think that she has substituted Charlie in, like, we get conversation about how he kind of looks similar to Richard.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that she is trying to broker a replacement relationship? Like, oh, I drifted away from my husband, but now I can kind of get it back in the form of his brother?
Joe, I truly don't know. Because I've asked myself this. No, because by the end, she knows, like, or at least she suspects. And it's like, okay, well, is it just her jealousy of India that makes her confront him? Or is she just learning this? Or has she known this the entire time? Or has she been piecing this together at the same time as India, but we're just seeing India's side? I don't know. I don't know.
Or maybe it's all of that, you know? I think we can infer or say all of those are very plausible.
Yeah. But the easiest explanation is yes, she is trying to replace Richard, but I don't know necessarily if I get that from her. I don't know.
It just seems a little too simplistic in some ways.
Well, yes. And that, honestly, that is kind of my issue with the screenplay in general.
Everything that you think is going on is exactly what's going on.
Well, I was never really sure if it was supposed to be a surprise that Charlie was a murderer.
I don't think so, because even if you wanted to say, yes, okay, we're not meant to know until a certain point because we clearly see him murder Auntie Jin.
Well, and that's the thing that with the Hitchcock like stuff, it's like, okay, Hitchcock had a fascination with like the lovable murderer or like the likable criminal. So it's what this is, but again, it's never out there so much to where it's obvious, because it does feel like sometimes the film is playing things close to the vest. Right. But then by the time the reveals happen, it's kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, that's kind of what I suspected.
I wonder if it's that it's not about us being surprised, but because we're actually seeing this all through India's perspective, it's about her discovering it.
Maybe, and that's entirely possible. And that's why I think if you watch this movie going in expecting like a twisty-turny thriller, that's not really what the movie is, or maybe not even what it's trying to do.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Okay, so India is hanging out with Whip. Things seem to be going well, so we try for a kiss, and she bites him.
And he says, cool, I'm gonna rape you.
Yeah, it's not what I expect to happen. I expect him to say, ooh, you are crazy, and
run away.
You know, run away or be excited or interested in that, but he is super aggressive, and you're right, absolutely rapey. So we get an attempted sexual assault here, and it only stops because Uncle Charlie has obviously followed her, and he just wraps this kid up in his belt, tosses him. I love the, again, immediate shift in reaction where Whip, you know, he was all bravado. He was like, yeah, I'm totally going to fucking rape you. And then moments later, after Charlie has tossed him, is, oh, I'm really hurt. Oh, I think my ankle.
Okay, I love that too. But then the idiocy of this character, because, okay, so Charlie's like, oh, he's all yours. So he lets India like kick the shit out of him for a bit. But then Whip grabs her, flips her down, and he tries to rape her again.
Yeah, when Uncle Charlie is definitely still there. I mean, this movie has it out for teen boys. They do not come off in a good light at all.
But it's important to say, though, so because the way that this is edited together, so we have her kicking him, and then we move forward in time a bit to where she's in the shower, washing the sin off of her body.
I mean, baby, she's committing sin as well.
Well, okay, but we don't know that yet because hold on.
If you haven't figured it out.
It starts as she looks very upset. She's crying, but then we flash back to continue the scene where, we see him flip her, we see him try to rape her again, and then we see, well, he'll die. And then while we get this death scene, that's when she starts to so her sobs of, like, her tears become moans of ecstasy as she is remembering her uncle snap this kid's neck with his belt, which, by the way, this is the murder scene that I was like, this is fantastic.
It's amazing. So this is the second sex scene, and you can't even misread it because Whip is literally on top of her like he is penetrating her. And we've got Uncle Charlie in the mix for a really kinky murderous threesome. So he puts the belt around Whip's neck, and then he just pulls back with all of his might. So yeah, we're basically doing a throuple murder. And then Uncle Charlie just lets the body drop on top of her.
Because we pull it into a long shot too. And again, Foley work with this neck snapping, but also...
It is so good.
The visual of his head just like snapping back is, it is. It's hauntingly realistic.
It is so fucking good. I think if for no other reason, watch the movie for this scene. Yes, obviously, content warning for sexual assault.
Yeah.
But it is so fucking gratifying to see what happens to this kid.
Well, India thinks so, because she comes to it in that shower.
She sure does. Yeah, she really gets off on it. So we then cut to, I mean, we didn't talk about it, but we did see her come back to the house completely covered in dirt. So we knew that she had been out there in that soft soil. So we see that they have dug a plot for Whip, and she is out there. And we didn't say it, but Auntie Jin passed her a note before she left.
Right.
And we discovered that that is her phone number, and that's why she was trying to call India later on at the motel. So India tries to call that number, and of course, the sound is coming from beneath the ground.
I'm going to tell you, too, if you're going to bury people in your backyard, are you going to leave the dirt patch there and then just put like a stone marker on top of it? Or are you maybe going to, I don't know, put grass on top of it?
I mean, you gotta wait for it. You can't just have sod there the very next day. I did like the idea, visually my mind immediately went to serial killer territory. And the fact that we have boulders all over the grounds. It's like, wait, have we been burying people here the whole time? How many people have died? How many people have suddenly gone missing on this property?
Oh my god.
But again, it's very Psycho-esque, right? I know a lot of people took issue with it. They said, oh, this is actually psycho-derivative. Oh, this is too much Hitchcock. And then other people said, oh, well, that's actually not giving the film enough credit.
Yeah.
I think it comes down somewhere in the middle. I think the film is very aware of all the Hitchcock references, but I think it's being playful with them. It's not existing entirely just to do homages to Hitchcock.
Yeah, no, I'm in complete agreement with you. I mean, I think if the craft behind of this film wasn't as impressive to me, you could easily see this as, oh yeah, this is a Hitchcock ripoff. But
yes,
it's not just that. And also, I don't think it has to be a bad thing if something is a Hitchcock ripoff.
I think it is when it feels like the film doesn't have anything else. Like,
sure,
oh, this is just you trying to do some other filmmaker style. Where is your style? But if you look at this film and you say, oh, this is just Park Chan-wook doing Hitchcock, I think you need to check yourself, because that is patently not true. Okay,
so compare it, because we had a very similar conversation about this in Robert Zemeckis' What Lies Beneath, which is Zemeckis doing Hitchcock.
Right, and I would say that Zemeckis is doing, I mean, it sounds sexy when I say it this way, but it's Zemeckis doing himself. Like, he's doing his version of Hitchcock. Exactly. You can still see himself in that.
But if you look at reviews of the time, some critics took him to task saying, it's just Hitchcock. That's all. I disagree with. Go listen to that episode.
Yeah, and you know what? We're going to have this conversation again in just a couple of weeks, so
okay.
Put it on the back burner, baby. Okay, so we have put a couple bodies in the ground. It's time to spend a bit more time with Mother. So India visits her mother's botanical garden bedroom. I have never seen so many plants in one person's boudoir. And I said boudoir, not bedroom, because this thing is like whore's red.
Yeah, whore's red. Sex worker's red.
Sorry, yes, I've been spending too much time around my father. That's what he used to call our basement.
Does your father throw around whore a lot?
You might be surprised. Yeah, no, this is... I think that this is such a stunning piece of production design. I'm really sorry if I offended anybody. I meant to be...
Oh my god, no, I'm fucking with you. Who cares?
I love this bedroom because it is so distinct from every other part of the house. It feels... If we look at the house as a cage that the characters are caught in, this feels like a separate, smaller cage that Evie is stuck in, or she's carved out for herself, where you can see this is who she is, but it's just one piece of the larger pie. But it's really telling.
It's illustrated, though. I love this brushing hair scene, because we don't get a ton of moments with just Evie and India. And so
true.
I love when she's like, oh, I never brushed your hair. Oh, well, you were busy. And you have that beat. And then Nicole Kidman's just like, doing what?
Good question, Evie. What do you do all the time? I mean, I think you could easily read depression into Evie's character, right? Where it's not just that her life hasn't turned out the way she wanted in terms of her marriage and being a mother, but also I get a lot of, what am I doing with my life in this giant house that, like, we don't think she works. I don't see her doing any work ever. So it's like, what does she do? What is her life except for these failed relationships?
Because you could almost see another version of this movie where it's also a coming of age or an identity search for Evie, because I don't think Evie even knows who she is. And it took the death of her husband to be like, because maybe that was her identity, right? Like, oh, I'm married to Richard. And without Richard, what am I? Because I'm certainly not a mother.
I don't think you're on the wrong track either, because even the costuming in this scene where we've got India coming in this silk nightgown.
Ooh,
and
yeah.
obviously, yes, at this point, we've had 2 sex scenes. So India is maturing. She feels more comfortable wearing something like a silk nightgown.
I wanted to wear that silk nightgown.
Oh, shut up, you. But it's very obviously paralleling what we see Evie wearing. Like, she's not just becoming a woman, she's also becoming more like her mother.
Well, and that's why she starts getting more jealous. Why Evie starts getting more jealous, right? Because, oh, shit, like, if India is the adult woman in the house, who's going to want me?
Well, and literally what's happening right now in this scene, your daughter is brushing your hair instead of vice versa, bitch. Like, are you infantilized? How come your daughter is more mature than you are?
Okay, but Joe, can we talk about this transition we get as we're
going? I've never seen something like this.
It's so good. So yeah, we're going from the red hair, like the brush going down Nicole Kidman's red ass, whore's red hair. Stop it. And then it slowly becomes like the tall grass in which India and Richard are hunting in a flashback.
And I cannot even, like, mentally, my brain broke a little bit when I saw this, because it is an extreme close-up of hair that then transitions into a long shot of an overhead. So it's like the camera was facing forward, and then all of a sudden we're almost bird's eye viewing India and her father Richard as they are hiding out, bonding, waiting to shoot birds out in the grasslands. It is stunning. It is so fucking stunning.
This was like, I put bold caps, yellow highlight in my notes. Holy shit, this transition.
It's amazing. And it's a fucking transition. Like, yes, it's obviously hugely important. We're going from mother-daughter relationship into daughter-father relationship. So the transition makes sense. It's not as though like, oh, he's doing it just to be showy. We didn't need this. But also, you didn't have to go so hard.
You did not. Yes.
Okay, so we see this, and Richard, I don't even know if he gets a line of dialogue here, because I'm pretty sure we mostly have India reflecting on why they were doing that. And in case you thought that I was being silly with my baby Dexter reference, she literally says hunting was doing something bad to stop you from doing something worse. So this is Richard teaching his daughter to kill birds so that she doesn't kill people.
All right, so we think that Richard actually what's funny is this would have come out the year of Dexter's final season.
Really? Okay.
So we then think that Richard saw Charlie in India, basically. And do you think that if he had not seen Charlie in India, that he would have been okay letting him meet her?
Oh, good question. Yeah, I mean, it seems very clear that he sees an opportunity to, like, fix the problems that led to his brother's death by trying to solve the problem of his daughter, right? Like, oh, okay, I know what she could become because I've already seen it in Charlie, so all I have to do is teach her how to become a different person, but that involves keeping them apart. But yeah, I mean, if she had it presented as quote-unquote normal for longer,
right?
Who's to say? But I mean, again, if you read this as like a loose coming-of-age / coming-of-sexuality story, you wouldn't have been able to keep that off for much longer, because when she became a woman, hypothetically, that's also when she would have started to discover more of herself, aka burgeoning serial killer.
I wonder if it's a thing too, like maybe he did, like when he was visiting Charlie in the institution, like he would start to tell him about her, but then it was like a thing where it's like the more he said about her and the more he saw Charlie reacting to what he was saying about India, by the time he realized, oh shit, it was like too late by that point, which is why... Because in my mind, I'm like, why don't you just not tell Charlie about India because you don't want them to be together? But if it was a case of, oh, he realized too late that they were kindred spirits, that he was struggling at the end to like make sure it wouldn't happen.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing is, there's a lot of lines in this movie about the importance of family and how family isn't friends. Family is family. Papa Corona, let's Fast and Furious this bitch up. But at the end of the day, I gather from what little we know of Richard, he was scared of his brother, but it seemed to me that he wasn't trying to close off communication with him. Like, he must have told Richard the address of where they were living, or Richard, I guess, just knew because that was their old house.
Oh, yeah. But that's the thing. Like, yeah, he clearly did love him, or at least felt some sort of familial obligation because, A, we know he kept seeing him, but also he paid for an apartment in New York City.
Yeah, he didn't want to be around him, but he also didn't want him to die. He didn't cut off communication. Even he kept all the letters.
Yeah.
Like, why would they have let India get all these shoes over the years?
I don't know.
I mean, visually, it just makes for good imagery and that kind of stuff. Like, we didn't talk about the image of all of the shoes laid out on the bed around her on the day of the funeral, because, like, that's a fucking stunning picture, too.
Well, because a bunch of shoes laid out looks better than a bunch of glasses of rotten milk.
I don't know. I would have to see it.
Yeah. She just never drank it. She just kept it on her nightstand the whole fucking 18 years.
I feel like we'd have an issue with bugs for sure.
Oh, God, the smell.
Okay, so speaking of letters, so India finally realizes that the key she received will open a locked drawer in her father's study. This is when she discovers, yes, pictures with not 2, but 3 Stoker brothers, as well as dozens of unopened letters from Uncle Charlie, all of them bearing the mark of Crawford Institute.
Yeah, and he is doing some real expert level lying in these letters too.
I love the fact that the movie doesn't need to spell it out that, all of the things he told her and Evie about traveling internationally, those are just bullshit lies he made up and he put in these letters.
Yeah, he had a French psychiatrist, hence his knowledge of French and French cuisine.
Oh, are you talking about Dr. Jacquin, played by Judith Godrich?
Yes, that one.
Yeah, so what's interesting about this is, at this point, India very clearly understands that her uncle is a murderer. She saw him kill Whip, and she also knows that Auntie Jin is underground. So she contemplates calling the sheriff. She makes the call, but she doesn't say anything. And it almost seems like she wants to hear Uncle Charlie's side of the story. So this is when we get the flipped power play on the stairs. And Uncle Charlie tells her, so he killed his youngest brother, Jonathan, who we only see in these pictures. But we do get a flashback recreation, and
I mean,
there's something amazing about seeing a child in a hole full of dirt that you just know, that we're going to fill in that hole.
Yeah,
I forgot about this part, so I get to go back and add this to my letterbox list of movies where we kill children.
We certainly do kill children. It's not even we see this kid in the empty hole, and then we'll go back to the present, and then we'll flash back again, and then when we see young, whoever was playing young Dermot Mulroney, discover... I'm sorry. Charlie did all of this while Richard was mowing the lawn. And
he was mowing the lawn, and then he's doing sand angels on top of the dead body.
Okay, that was my favorite touch. He is so happy he killed this kid. He's doing sand angels on it.
Yeah. And of course, as soon as you see that, you're meant to jump back to India on her bed doing the exact same motion, which again, I can imagine some people rolling their eyes, say, it's too heavy-handed. Like, why is she repeating the same motion if she's never met this man? I love it. I love it.
I honestly, all these things that we're saying are heavy-handed on the nose. Yes, they are, but there's an elegance to them where it all works for me.
Yeah, because it's shot so fucking well.
Yeah, exactly. And everyone, bear in mind, this is a kid who's roughly 10 years old murdering a kid who is about 3 years old. It's like the good son up in here.
Maybe a little bit older, but yeah, it is very much, this kid doesn't even know he's in danger. He's just at the bottom of a hole, and then that hole gets filled up.
Yeah, that hole gets filled up. Oof, God.
I love it. And we also, at this part, so we're getting all of Charlie's mysteries just completely exposition dumped.
Yeah.
So we also get to see him, getting told by Richard, oh, no, you're not coming back to the house because I don't fucking trust you. You're going to go to New York. I've got your convertible car. It's going to be great. And then Richard goes bye-bye because Charlie hits him in the face a bunch of times with a rock.
Yeah, that's, I can't have you near my India, my family. But I'm family. What kind of a family is family you can't take home?
Yup. Apparently dead.
Which, again, going into like this kind of queer parallelism we have going on here, I can read that into it. And I do wonder if any of this, I mean, not the incest stuff, but like any of these moments, like the bullying or these lines about family are things that, that Wentworth pulled from his own life.
Right. Yeah, we haven't really talked about that, but I do feel like there's just the disturbingness of this movie feels inherently queer to me. So, knowing that Wentworth Miller is a gay man, those issues of, yes, bullying, of not being accepted by your family, of feeling different and trying to find a refuge in kindred spirits, it all makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, very much so. And I don't know if there are any non-queer listeners out here, I don't know if they're like finding anything to latch onto with this, but watching this, I couldn't help but feel like, yeah, even though this isn't explicitly a queer theme narrative, like I detect a lot of queer aspects to it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure anybody who's got a black sheep of the family can probably relate to some of this too, but yeah, it feels just a tinge more queer.
Yeah.
So Uncle Charlie wraps up story time by confessing that he's basically been waiting for her to turn 18, and then he swaps out ye old children shoes for a pair of alligator Louboutin high heels.
I will say it was kind of interesting. Like the second we see her those heels, I was like, oh wow, like it really is amazing how much of a difference shoes will make a woman feel.
Tell me, Trace, did this sequence in particular, so the focus on high heels as a sexually loaded but also a kind of sexual maturity piece, knowing what we know of how Park Chan-wook influenced something like The Perfection?
Oh, okay.
So this movie came out in 2013. The Perfection comes out in 2018, 2019. And we know for sure that they reference things like The Handmaiden
in
and
The Perfection.
Thirst. Yeah. And I can't help but wonder the specific emphasis on high heels in this particular film. I'm just like, were you paying attention?
Well, actually, that's even leading me to, so again, like this being Park Chan-wook's only English language film, does anything in this film feel specifically like, I don't know, Korean to you? Or does it feel like an American film?
I would argue that it feels American, and what's true is how he directs a Korean film is also applicable here. So I don't think that's a Korean element. I think that's him, a director kind of trademarks visual style. So this is him not making a Korean film, it's making an American quote-unquote film, but bringing all of the sensibility that he brought to his previous Korean films over.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense.
And folks, if you have not seen a bunch of his other films, like obviously now we've covered a couple, but if you haven't seen something like, say, Old Boy, this would make a great double feature.
Have you ever seen Lady Vengeance?
So I haven't seen the two Vengeance films.
Okay, so just so you know, Old Boy's considered the middle part of that trilogy.
Right, yeah.
But I had to watch all of them. Actually, I had to watch the two Vengeance ones, Mr. and Lady Vengeance, in college. Right. But we didn't watch Old Boy because the teacher was very much like, everyone knows what Old Boy is. And I was like, at the time I was like, I don't know what that is.
I think it's weird to make a default assumption that people in high school or college would necessarily know about genre from South Korea.
I think, well, I mean, you've been to film school. I think they think y'all are a bunch of film nerds. Like, we know what you watch.
Yeah, but that was the exact period when I was actively courting and looking for recommendations. If somebody was like, oh, you should see Old Boy because it's a great film, I would have been so much more receptive to it. But if somebody says, oh, you should know it, and that's why I'm not going to screen it, like,
yeah,
that's taking a risk. I'm never going to seek it out.
Well, it's like I had to, like I said in the Psycho episode, we had a professor that wanted to show us Peeping Tom because everyone's seen Psycho, you know?
Right.
Yeah. I mean,
I guess there's only so many films you can show people.
Yeah. I'm not saying it's like right or wrong. It's more of a thing where it's like, I wonder if the mentality is, we know you're going to watch these types of films eventually because they are like, they're in the public lexicon, you know, like everyone knows, at least knows what these films are. Let's go look at the more lesser known works to broaden your horizons.
Oh, that's fair. Okay.
Yeah. Lady Vengeance, by the way, great.
Okay, good. Yeah, I think I heard Mr. Vengeance is like the weakest of the three.
It is, but honestly, here's the thing. I don't really remember much about Mr. Vengeance.
Okay.
And not because it was bad. I watched it when I was 19 years old. Same with Lady Vengeance, but I rewatched that one a couple years later. Oldboy is my favorite of the three, which,
Sure.
whatever. But Lady Vengeance is real good.
Oh, good. Okay. I should seek it out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so because we have put a couple of bodies into the ground, it's about time for Sheriff Howard, who is played by Ralph Brown, to come around.
Cops.
Well, and also she did make a phone call, and they would have been able to trace it.
Yeah.
So part of me thinks, okay, the two things probably added up. So he shows up, and he's asking questions about Whip specifically, but before he leaves, he does also comment on Mrs. McGarrick's sudden disappearance. So Charlie reads the writing on the wall and tells India, don't worry, tomorrow the two of us are going to leave for New York. And this would probably be fine if only they again weren't having the conversation on the stairs and Evie weren't at the top of them.
Right. Okay, so is this when the film starts to maybe not fall apart for you, but like it's not quite as effective as it was beforehand?
Yeah, it feels like we should be building to something, and I would argue we do get a very satisfying climax, but I think even him sitting down and us getting all of those flashbacks in one fell swoop feels a little indelicate. I wish that there was a way that we could have dispersed it or introduced it a little bit more organically throughout, or maybe not had to have the character say, hey, here's how I ended up here.
Right. And see, for me, it's, and this is maybe a very basic opinion about this, but it's more so like, yeah, the climax to me is fine, but I think maybe it's because the actual climax of this film is a thematic climax. It's not an action climax. And I think maybe that's where I'm struggling. Like, I mean, India's journey is very clear from beginning, middle to end, but there's still something I feel where it's like, I just feel like there's something missing from this, where it's not hitting as hard as it should for me, and I can't quite put my finger on why.
Interesting. Okay. Well, maybe let's move along to the part that I consider the climax, and we'll see if you have a different read.
Okay.
Okay. One other interesting piece about this is that when we see Evie at the top of the stairs, hearing them as they're making these plans to escape to New York, we then also see that she's been eavesdropping on them. So she actually saw them playing the piano earlier. So she has been kind of keeping tabs on them. And this is a bit of a weird, again, we don't know enough about Evie to know what she knows, but we clearly can see from these sequences that she suspects something has been going on for a while, but she hasn't acted on it.
Mm-hmm.
So part of me is like, okay, well, I just don't understand her logic or why she's waiting. Like, what's making her hesitate?
I don't fully understand. Yeah, her motivation to not do anything.
Well, I mean, her big scene is now. So we've got one final dinner sequence, and this is essentially when Evie monologues all about why do we have children, and it's an opportunity to have them do it better than you, or to see them do it better. And then she lays that out. I can't wait for life to tear you apart.
I like this because we don't know up front that she's talking to India. So I think we're supposed to wonder, is she talking to Charlie or is she talking to India? But it's after the I can't wait to watch life tear you apart. Then we cut to India.
Right.
That whole part's in the fucking trailer.
Oh, boy. I mean, it's great. It's probably
good. It's Kidman's best moment in the film.
Yeah, it's the high point for this character because she's finally verbalizing all the things that she's obviously been repressing and internalizing for the entire film. But to blow that on the trailer that people might watch 1 billion times.
I know, but I do like though because again, we don't end with, personally speaking, I can't wait to watch life tear you apart. Mm-hmm. We get a little bit more. She goes, India, who are you? You were supposed to love me, weren't you? So it's like, this isn't just like coming from a place of rage. It's coming from a place of sadness and regret and sorrow.
Oh, 100%. She's wounded, right? Which I think inherently is one of the dangers of having children. Like, you can't look at it as, oh, I'm having these creatures who are going to love me forever or unconditionally even.
Yeah, unconditional love? What's that?
It's just, that's a very selfish reason to have children. You can't have them because you want them to love you. Like, that's not why we have kids.
Well, but again, this is her whole life story. So again, like, we don't get flashbacks to her, which is like, we've already said this, but it's like, okay, I choose to believe that her relationship with Richard was probably going bad quicker, or maybe they were going distant sooner. And so, let's have a kid to fix things. And at least on her part, because she says, you why do we have kids? To wipe the slate clean, to do what we could not, to see where we had failed. So it was like, okay, she was hoping that then this India would be a little version of her, but she wasn't, because she went to the dad.
And we know enough of Evie that she is well educated. She speaks French at least, so she probably had ambitions to travel and do something more. And instead, she ended up, kind of a little bit like a Mrs. Dalloway character, where she's gotten sequestered in this house and she's had to watch her life pass her by. And she doesn't even have the pleasure of having a child who loves her. But now she's actively lashing out and possibly putting both her and India in harm by allowing this murderer to stay with them.
Well, that's the other thing too, right? Because by this point, she does know that Charlie's a murderer.
I mean, she's got to at least suspect. Like, I don't know that... I don't believe that she knows it fully until she invites him upstairs. So it's the very next scene, right? And we've talked a lot about the technical audacity of this movie, the framing of this conversation. So it's a slight overhead shot as we're in the hallway looking at Evie as she's waiting to speak with Charlie. And there's two doors that are open, and she closes the one that allows us to see her, so India can only hear her and we can only hear through the open door. And then Charlie goes in and he closes the other door. I fucking love it.
So, but when she tells Charlie, have me instead and stay away from my daughter.
Oh yeah, by this point she absolutely knows, but it's wild that he's still kind of keeping up this secret ruse with her where they look like they're about to fuck. He's saying, don't worry, you're going to go travel because India's going to inherit this house. But he says India's going to inherit this house. And there's a beat. And you can see her mind racing, Evie's mind racing, because she's trying to figure out if that means he's going to kill her. And then he says, well, you're going to travel. And really, you could read that two ways. Like, you're actually going to get to travel, or I'm going to tell everybody that you're traveling and I'm going to fucking murder you.
Well, that's kind of my thing. So, like, if she's like, have me instead and take me away from stay away from my daughter, it's like, okay, is she saying that because she's trying to protect India, even though we just watched her give this big ass monologue about how she can't wait to watch life tear her apart? Or is it like, have me instead, please, I need somebody, take me?
I mean, she does instigate sex.
Yeah.
Here, it's fascinating because we don't know. So you can read it both ways, or you have to read it both ways because she must understand the danger that she's in, whether she's doing this to try to protect India or if she actually is still kind of horny for this guy. We don't know. All we know is that it ends up starting like a conventional sex scene, albeit with some tears. And then he gets her into that strangulation pose that he just loves so much.
Pulls out good old belt.
So he calls for India, and and dear Lord, I don't know how Nicole Kidman did this without absolutely having a panic attack, because she's on the floor with this belt around her neck. We're constantly in the hallway, so we're just seeing her head as she's being kind of lifted up off the ground, and she's crying. And then India shows up, and Trace, she's got a bag, but she's also got the rifle case. Did you ever think that she was going to shoot Evie?
Well, I'm trying to think on that first watch 10 years ago. I think I might have.
Okay.
I mean, again, this is the like their motivations are never entirely clear, so it's like I don't. It doesn't seem like she really loves her mother that much, but it doesn't seem like she's really bought fully into Charlie's stuff. But maybe she has. So it wasn't really I don't know. I don't find this like to be a huge like, oh my God, who's she going to kill moment? It's kind of like, oh, I wonder who she's going to kill moment for me,
Okay, so this is not a satisfying climax to you, because I think conventionally this is what people would consider like, this is the moment. India is going to make her choice. What kind of killer is she?
Yeah, I guess.
You're so underwhelmed. I love it.
I know, and it's fine. I remember the first time I watched this, I was like, okay, cool. I guess I kept thinking there was going to be something more after this, and there wasn't. I mean, there is, but, you know.
There is, but it's not a ton. Yeah, like, this is meant to be the high point. So, India obviously shoots her uncle. It's not as gratuitously violent as I might have expected. It's okay.
Yeah, it's fine.
And then Evie is left looking horrified. This is great. You know, if we're going to praise ambiguity, I'm happy to put it here as opposed to how little we know about Evie as a character. I love effectively leaving her. Like, she gets one more scene where she wakes up in bed. She's not actually dead. India doesn't kill her. But in this moment, this is the goodbye between mother and daughter. Right. And she looks horrified of either who India has become, or she's finally seeing her daughter for what she really is for the very first time.
Right. And I'm not saying I was expecting, oh, yay, Evie and Indy are going to, like, make amends. They're going to become... I didn't expect that.
It's Thelma and Louise with mother and daughter.
Right. I didn't expect that. But it's, we're just leaving this woman behind, which I guess is fitting because she wasn't a very good mother to begin with. But it's, I just find this a little underwhelming, and it's not bad. I'm just kind of like, I kind of was hoping or wishing there was something more to it, but that's where again the thematic climax comes into play, right? Because this is about India's journey as a character.
Yeah, and there's something poetic about the idea that and there's something poetic about the idea that Evie never made it out of the house. Like, if you think about it, we only see that character outside once in this entire movie. It's when she goes to play tennis. So the idea that, she is just left behind in this giant empty house all alone, it's actually kind of cathartic. And yet, you're right, it doesn't have quite enough pop to it.
Yeah, but I mean, it's an unconventional movie, so...
Sure.
Yay.
Yay. So we cut to the next morning. This is, I do love this technical bit where we go from the bullet in the glass down the hall with the blood trail as we have obviously dragged the body. At this point, we don't know whether it's Evie or Charlie or both. So there's something very satisfying about that part.
Yeah.
We do see that Evie is actually still in bed. She wakes up as India packs the car, drives away. She's speeding so quickly, Trace, that she immediately attracts the attention of the sheriff, and then the natural geography clues us in,
this is the beginning of the movie.
This is the beginning of the movie. Yeah. So, we did see Charlie using gardening shears earlier when he was, watching her make the phone call to the sheriff. So, again, we're anticipating this moment where she takes the gardening shears, and in an extreme long shot, she just stabs them right into the sheriff's neck. He's bleeding out all over this foliage, and she's walking among it. It's very pretty.
This is probably unintentional, but there's a shot, his blood is spraying over everything, but there's a shot where the blood sprays all over these white flowers.
Yes.
And I was wondering if that was an homage to Alice in Wonderland, because there's a whole set piece where they, paint the flowers red.
Right, yeah. That guy who wanted to insist that this movie is, all about... a sexy coming of age kind of deal. He was like, this is kind of like when a woman has sex for a first time and she leaves blood on the sheets. And I was like, okay, I guess.
But it's not her blood. Oh, God. Oh, we didn't mention this, but that fucking blister popping scene that's early in the film.
Ooh. Dr. Pimple Popper called.
Cannot. I don't want to look at that shit. It's so gross.
Well, of course, yes. This is one of the things that you don't enjoy.
I do not like it.
Anyway, the movie ends with her pulling out the gun, and we hear the shot, and that's the end of the film. So presumably she will take Uncle Charlie's convertible and drive to the New York apartment and start life anew. But also she needs to get better at this, because you can't just shoot a sheriff on the side of the road and expect to get away with it.
Okay, that's the thing. So do you think she's going to stay being a killer and killing people, or is she only killing this sheriff because he's the only one that would connect any of this to her?
Oh, sweetie, now she's a killer for life.
Okay, I'm just so she's gonna go and be Diana Rigg in Last Night in Soho. She's just gonna start killing people.
100%, yeah.
Oh, spoiler alert for Last Night in Soho, y'all. Sorry.
Nah. That's not the most interesting part of that film, so it's fine.
It's a campy part of that film.
Yes, indeed. Go listen to that Patreon episode if you want to hear me whine about it.
Yeah. But yeah, that is Stoker. Joe, final thoughts.
You know, I really like about 80 to 85% of this movie. I think it's super, super effective, but from about Charlie's confession on the stairs on, there's just something. It's not quite clicking, but technically, visually, the sound design in this movie, like, this is such a technically fantastic film that just getting to rewatch it was such a sheer fucking joy. Like, costumes, cinematography, and I really, really like this cast. You know, do I wish we could get more of Nicole Kidman, more Jackie Weaver?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's just a few deficiencies in the script, but overall, I really enjoy revisiting this film, you know, every about 4 to 5 years.
Yeah, no, I'm in agreement. Style over substance, sure, but there is still substance here. It's not style, all style, and no substance.
Right.
But yeah, there's just something missing for me in that climax and by the end of the film where I feel like I just feel a little deflated. But again, it's not a film ruining thing for me. This is a 7 out of 10. It makes me really wish that Wentworth Miller would write more.
Right.
And I would also love to see Park Chan-wook do another English language films with more American actors too.
I will agree with you on that first part because I would love to see more Wentworth Miller in general, but I don't need Park Chan-wook to make more English language films because I appreciate that he tried it. This feels like a bit of a novel experiment, but his Korean films are so fucking good. I'm happy for him to make them in his own language if he chooses.
I agree. Sorry, let me clarify. It's not really like the language thing. It's more so I kind of want to see him work with like American actors and like see more of like actors that I'm familiar with, like in his sandbox.
Yes, that is true because I'm going back to that documentary I referenced off the top. They all talk about how either they were attracted to the project because of him or they enjoyed working with him so much because he is such a kind of singular visionary.
Yeah.
And you can see that. I mean, I appreciate what you said about how Mia doesn't jump off the page, but for me, I think that's because of the character. Yeah. And I actually think she's really, really good in this movie. But everybody in this movie is really, really good. Yeah. It's just a question of getting a bit more of them.
Well, that's the thing. If you watch a movie and you're like, oh my God, I wish I had more of that, it's because you like what you see.
Exactly. And sorry, I'll say one more thing and then we can wrap up. I'm flabbergasted at your Last Night in Soho comparison because I felt almost the exact same way about that movie where so much of it was working and then at a certain point the movie doesn't really work for me, but it's a narrative thing. But the style of that movie is so engrossing and I really like what Edgar Wright is doing with it. But I will say I enjoy Stoker more.
Yeah, well, it's also shorter and less self-indulgent, I think.
Maybe a bit of that. But you know what? I would be interested. I would say that's an interesting double bill that I would maybe love to hear people's thoughts on. You know, Last Night in Soho and Stoker.
And Stoker. Absolutely. Well, all right, everyone. So before we announce what we're covering next week, if you want to get in touch with us, please reach us on Twitter and Instagram X and Instagram.
Oh my God. Or Blue Sky. We're also building a fan base on Blue Sky because who knows what's going on with X.
That's the only reason I haven't really used it more because I'm like, I just want to wait and see what is going to be the next Twitter before I really start using one of them.
Nothing is going to be. We're all just flailing about on the internet at this point.
Yeah. But anyway, so you can shoot us an email at horrorqueers@gmail.com. Find us on Letterboxd to keep track of all the films we've covered. Go to our YouTube channel to check out our interviews with various horror filmmakers and tune in once a month to hear about our most anticipated horror films for that month. If you want to chat with other listeners, join our Facebook Horror Queers group. If you love us, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I mean...
Oh, she's pushing the reviews.
I love the star ratings, but every now and then I'll go check our reviews on Apple Podcasts. I'm like, oh, look, we got a rating, but there's no review. So it's, someone, quote unquote, just gave us a star rating. I like reading the reviews. I like reading the reviews.
We like knowing why you feel the way you feel, even if it is something like dunking on the fact that I can't say appreciate.
Okay, but...
That was funny. I like that.
But why can't you say appreciate? Because it really throws me every time you say appreciate.
I don't know, Trace. Why can't you say charade?
I also can't... I can't say prologue.
Oh my God, you make it sound like a prolapsed anus.
Because I say prologue.
You also say charade, and I can never guess whether you're joking or if you actually mean to say it that way.
Oh, no, that's a joke. I do say charade, but charade's like the fancy way of saying it. It's like isn't that French?
No.
Oh, fuck. Well, whatever.
Certainly not the way you say it.
Anyway, if you want even more content, though, please support the show by becoming a patron at patreon.com/horrorqueers. We are, almost done with August, but subscribe today and you will get about 258 hours of Patreon content, including this month's discussion of horror tropes that gotta go, as well as episodes on Meg 2, The Trench, Talk to Me, and The Last Voyage of the Demeter. And of course, to tie in with that last one, our audio commentary for the month is on Bram Stoker's Dracula, the Coppola one.
Yes, the Coppola one.
Joe.
Yes.
What are we talking about? Oh my God, what are we talking about next week?
Oh my God, Trace. We are kicking off an entire month dedicated to erotic thrillers. And we're starting with kind of a granddaddy of them all. I mean, this is an early film for the subgenre, and it's a director we've never covered before in Brian De Palma's Dress to Kill.
Oh my God, have we never covered a Brian De Palma film?
I was like, no, this can't be right.
I think you're right.
We must have covered one, but the reality is no, I don't think we have.
Yeah, well, everyone, this is a juggernaut of a film. Lots to talk about in terms of, is it good? Is it bad? Is it offensive? Is it not?
Yeah,
boy.
We're going to have some talks.
All right, but until next week, everyone, we can cross out Stoker.
Yes, and cross out horror queers.
Atlas Avenue, a long stretch of road that encompasses everything the city of Kennett Heights has to offer. Neon lights, traffic, crime, the hustle and bustle of everyday life, and the craziest of characters. My office was above it all. My name is James Locke, and I'm a PI.
Hello, Mr. J. How the hell you doing today?
Good, Edith. Nearly every year I have a new case. New people to meet, new clues to discover, and new problems to solve. But I do it the old-fashioned way. No technology. Nothing post-1950. Hell, I don't even listen to podcasts, but you should. Atlas Avenue Beat is a spoof of the film noir genre with goofy characters, tons of wordplay, and non-stop raunchy humor. There's also 3 whole seasons out right now with more on the way. Just search for Atlas Avenue Beat wherever you listen to podcasts or visit us online at bloody.fm.